Hey everybody, it's Jason Blah here. You guys know what time it is. Time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And one of my subscribers has awared me and linked me a video done by Jeff Cavalier, aka Athlean-X, aka Curling-X, discussing how big can you get. So let me put on my plus 5 hat of speechcraft, lovingly called my plus 5 hat of autism by many of you, and let's talk about this. Now, I'm actually going to agree with the overall message that Jeff put out. I'm going to agree that he's right, that the whole formulas, some of these formulas that people come up with based upon wrist circumference and height, not actually good. They're not even actually that good of formulas. They're not particularly scientific. They're not based upon any real research or even real anecdote. Um, and quite frankly, I think the max size a lot of these suggest you can get to is actually small. Like you would have to have below average genetics to be limited to that, or really bad training. Like I'm sorry, people of average genetics with really really good training can put on more muscle size than what a lot of those formulas would suggest. And I will agree with that. I'll agree with that. Although maybe the arm size is probably pretty close. I don't think people realize how big an actual 17-inch arm actually is, because most people lie about their arm size till you measure it. You'd be surprised. A lot of dudes who talk about having a 19-inch arm actually have a 17-inch arm. So put that in perspective. But as far as the amount of lean mass a person can have, how much muscle, yeah, I think those particular formulas are pretty far off, unless you're just genetically under gifted or you don't train legs or something like that. So he's essentially right. My real concern, though, was that Jeff always spins stuff over to bodybuilding. I mean, every example he showed was a bodybuilder, and all he talked about was looking good. And that's one of the things that does bother me a little bit. And that's one of my pet peeves with Jeff. You know, a lot of his physical therapy stuff's pretty good. It's actually good. I've even learned things there. But, you know, again, he knows his audience. He wants to talk about strength. He wants to talk about athleticism. But then when things come around, it's back to doing slow, goofy reps and bodybuilding training and talking about bodybuilding. And there's never any real strength training done. I just don't feel that anything is athletic or strength oriented other than maybe some hopping around on one leg or throwing a Bosu ball and then back to doing bodybuilding. It's like, you know, I don't see the strength training happening, which is my forte, and that's fine. I get it. I understand most of his audience are insecure guys who have very, very little experience with training, who just want abs and they want to look good because they think it'll get them girls, who don't know that much about training, so they'll fall for a lot of the BS there, and he markets it in that direction. I get it, man. I get it. Just like my boy Chris Jones markets that. You know, as he always say, um, rose for your back gets those hoes in the sack, gives you that V taper that makes the hoes want to rape you, right? He knows all that's not true. He knows that getting a nice body and getting in shape is not going to just land you piles of girls, but it's marketable, right? And so, you know, I mean, Jeff does that. I get it. I get it. Not based on reality, but it's marketable. So I understand, guys. There's a lot of insecure dudes who honestly think that's going to be their magic secret to, you know, finally losing their virginity. And hey, maybe it will. If they don't have any confidence and that makes them confident, then, you know, by all means, carry on. It will help. But if you're still insecure and have no personality and no confidence even after you get in shape, you're just going to be a virgin who buys a lot of protein and spends a lot of time in the gym. You know, you're not, nothing's going to change. But over to the point. I didn't like the fact that it was all bodybuilders, bodybuilders, bodybuilders. And Jeff, every single person that he uses as an example is a very, very heavily enhanced bodybuilder. Like nobody that he uses as an example only uses a little bit of gear, you know, a couple D-bowl taps, right? Franco and Arnold were competing in the Mr. Olympia in a time period where they had access to legal, easy anabolics, and they used tons of them. They were fairly open about it. They used a lot of gear. Everybody knows it. It wasn't just a little bit. The Rock abuses copious amounts. Right? He uses a ton of gear. So, I mean, why are we even using those as an example? He said, oh, I'll never look like The Rock because, you know, his frame and whatever. And it's like, well, you're probably not willing to inject as much stuff into your body as he does, Jeff. Let's just call it like it is. Let's just be honest here. And that's not even saying Jeff's necessarily natty either. But it's very obvious that Jeff would never be willing to put the amount of drugs into his body that, you know, Dwayne Johnson does. I mean, realistically, I don't think most people are willing to go that far. And it's not to say the guy doesn't have a massive frame and he's not very genetically gifted, because he obviously is, but there's a pretty heavy doses of drugs involved there also. I mean, that's a factor. So why are you even talking about these guys? Why are you using them as examples? You can't stand there and say, hey, these sort of standards will make people feel insecure and just give up, but then you give them examples that are unobtainable. You're giving them examples of guys who are well above average genetics and who have a history of abusing pretty hefty doses of anabolics. Right? That is not the combination that you want to use when you say, well, you might not look quite like these guys. Like, no, you're not going to look like these guys. You're not, you don't have their genetics and you're not using the amount of drugs they were. Okay? That's kind of a winning combination in the bodybuilding world. Genetics plus hefty amounts of drugs. Yeah, that'll get it done. That's more important than the training. And it's pretty obvious when you watch some of them. But I do like the message that he put out, though, that, you can't limit yourself based upon charts like this. Now, people say, Jason, are you saying that there aren't natural limits and we should know them? Of course, I'm not saying that you should know what natural limits are. I'm not saying you shouldn't accept that you have limits. But you also shouldn't get discouraged and say, hey, I'm going to try to reach this limit. I would say is the same thing Jeff said, and he's right. The amount of muscle that you think you can gain, okay, why don't you just gain as much as you can this year? Right? Why don't you spend the next year gaining as much muscle as you can, getting as strong as you can on all your basic exercises, and if you want to do some curls, fine. Throw some curls in. It's not going to hurt you. Get strong on all your basic exercises, put on as much muscle as you can over the next year. Try not to get too fat because you're going to have to bulk a little bit. Eat plenty of protein, eat a good diet, put some muscle on, right? See where you can get. Don't get discouraged, reach what you can get. But, obviously don't use examples of guys who are very genetically gifted who use copious amounts of drugs, okay? And if that's what you're using as your example, then yeah, that is an unrealistic expectation. But can you look up to some of those people and say, well, could you use them for inspiration and motivation? Sure, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's fine. As long as you understand that you're not going to get where they are. And then you'll get some people, who will go to the other extreme and they'll say, well, you're saying that is imposing a limit. Maybe they can. And it's like, no, because I'm not going to encourage people to blast 3 grams of gear a week, because that's basically what you're saying, because they're not going to do it drug-free. They're not going to do it with modest doses either. So no, I'm not going to stand there and try to limit someone with something unrealistic. But by that same token, we really shouldn't put that big limit on people and say, hey, you're not going to reach the size that you might want to reach. And I would say to a lot of guys, don't spend a lot of time focusing on your limits. But I would say by that same token, don't use the other people as an example. And I do like that he did kind of point that out. Don't use other people as an example if that's where you want to be, and then be disappointed when you don't get there. Because that's the problem we run into with that, of those examples being used. Well, if I just buy their supplement or just do their routine, I'll get there. Well, see, that's a problem. That's a problem. When you start buying into that, you're now ready to be conned, because you won't. Because you might use their routine, you might use their supplements, but that's not their magic secret, right? You're going to need their parents, and you're going to need their drug stack. That's what you're going to need most of the time. Then you've got to be realistic about that. You have to be realistic about that. But I will agree that we shouldn't necessarily impose limits. I would only impose limits of saying, when you say, hey, that's where I want to be, and you're using an example of someone who very clearly abuses a large amount of drugs and with good genetics, right? That's actually pretty stupid to use that as an example. But you shouldn't impose limits of saying, I think I can only gain X amount of muscle. I think I can only gain X amount of strength. That's my limit. I don't think you should impose that sort of limit on yourself. You just shouldn't use people as examples. Because when you use other people's examples, you're setting yourself up for something that's unrealistic. But what is realistic is to say, I'm going to get as strong as I can. I'm going to gain as much muscle as I can. I'm going to do the best that I can within my ability, and I'm going to find my limits. And when I find my limits, I might see if I can push a little bit further than what seems to be my limit. Because maybe that wasn't really my limit. That was just my limit for now. I can do better. Right now, I think that's a reasonable attitude. And maybe that's the direction he should have pushed with it. But I feel like in a way he worded it that way. It's just he probably shouldn't have put these guys up. And again, we're talking about limits. If you wanted to throw some people up there, you should probably throw some people up there who are probably natty. Probably natty. Probably be a good idea. Just my opinion, though. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.